So you've been out and got yourself a brand new shiny reel. I'm going to show you how to load it with line. Really easy. There's blooming loads of videos. We've done lots of videos on this as well, but I'm going to show you the simplest way of loading a spool. Now, what you've got to consider, most reels that you'll get will come with a spare spool. So you get a spool that's on the reel, in this case already on the rod, and then you get a spare spool with it. Now, there'll be somewhere along here, there'll be numbers along the bottom which says line capacity. It's got like loads of different numbers and letters and things like that, and that is, it's a rough guide to how much line that spool will take with the diameter of the line. But don't let that confuse you. It used to proper confuse me all the time, folks. So then I started loading my reels like I'm going to show you now, and I've never ever looked back. The thing to bear in mind is I'm going to be using two different kinds of reel. I'm going to be, line. I'm going to be using a backing line, which is going to be much thicker than the line that I want to use when I'm fishing. So what I do first is I put my line that I want to use first. In this case, I'm using a reel line, a floating waggler reel line, 0.18 diameter. I'm not going to confuse you with that, but basically nothing above a 0.20 in this diameter for most of your waggler fishing. Stick to that. That is going to go on my spool first, and then I'm going to put some real heavy, thick, this is sea line, folks, thick backing line, which will bulk everything up. Because if you were to buy two of them, it's blooming expensive, isn't it? You know what I mean? So what you want to do, just get some old cheap line and then put that on. So first things first, what we need to do is get this beauty out of the packet. Take your plastic cover off. Now the easiest way is to, what I've got here, I've just got a 10-foot bomb rod, folks. I've not even got the top section of it on. I'm just going to put the line through these two eye guides here, and then obviously onto my reel. So we'll get a bit of line out from that spool, go back to the start of it. So go through that eye, pull that through, go through that eye, and then pull that through. So line is through two of your eye guides here. The next thing I'm going to do now is I'm just going to form a loop in this line if really I can get in on it. Dead simple. Sort of almost similar to if you were doing like a hook length loop or anything like that, or you know, a loop for your connector for your pole. So basically loads of line out, pull load back, chop it round your finger, and I'm just going to go through, put that loop through that big loop just once, and that's what we're left with. Keep your finger and thumb on that, and then you're just left with a nice simple loop like that. Dead simple. Next thing I want to do is trim that down. Now you can do it with your teeth, but it's better with scissors because you can get a much neater trim. See key? Much neater trim, but you can go much lower, much lower to that knot than where your teeth would have it. So that's trim right to the bottom there. Then what I want to do is get, so your single piece of line, open that loop up, your single piece of line, I'm just going to grab that and pull it through that loop of line. So you can see I can have that whatever diameter I want to. Now the most important thing, I've done this loads of times, folks, is forget to lift this bail arm off when I'm putting this on. So make sure you pull the bail arm over on your reel first. Then you get your line, put that over the spool, and then I'm just going to pull that line down, and then it'll chop itself. So close the bail arm, and then the best thing, or the easiest way of loading the line, is just to put it in a bucket of water. Now what I like to do is make sure the your clutchy thing, your whatever it's called, you know what I mean, that is closed right up as maximum it can go. Your drag, that's what I was looking for, folks. Your drag, make sure that's closed right up, because you don't want it spinning when you're putting the line on, because it can cause all the line twists and everything. So as that's in the bucket, it's just a case of just winding all that line on. I like to use my hand as a guide as well, so I know it's going nice and smooth onto my reel. Because if you let everything go like I'm doing now, it can sometimes go a little bit slack onto your reel spool. I don't want that. I want it nice and tight on there. Let's get that going in the water. That's it. So it'll take a bit. There's 150 meters on this spool, and if you stick to about that, most lines, I suppose, reel lines will come anything from 150 to 300 metres. It's usually around 150 metres though that you'll get. So, right, there we go. So, loosen that off. So that's all the line from, oh, it fell off. That's all the line from that spool on there. Next thing we need to do, because you'll see, obviously, if you just loaded all that line onto onto your spool of your reel, there's not enough on there. So what's going to happen when you're casting, a light float out, something like that? It's, it'll work for a ledger bomb, but for a light float, then there's going to be a load of friction as your line comes over the lip of this spool here, and you're not going to get the required distance. So that's why we've got to make sure, spat everywhere then folks, I do apologise. That's why we've got to make sure that our line is nice and smooth up to the top of the spool there. So that's why we need our backing. So the backing that we've got, as I said, this is just C-line, 0.30 diameter. Now I'm going to use a different knot with this one. I'm not even sure what it's called. I think it's a half blood knot. We're going to go for the half blood knot. So your main line that you just put on your spool, I'm going to form a loop in my backing line. So I'm just going to put that line through that loop there, and I'm just going to twist round sort of 4 or 5 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the tag end that you're left with, you'll see there's a little loop in the line that you've just been twisting round, the backing line. If you put that tag end through there and then just pull tight on that, it'll naturally, if you pull it too tight, it will start to come back because I've not gone back through the little loop. So it'll naturally just rest against that the backing line. But don't pull too tight because obviously it will come back on itself. And then you do exactly the same knot on your backing line again. So twist that round, and again 4 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm just putting that through there, and again just pulling down nice and tight on that. And that is how you connect the 2 bits of line. Yeah. Next thing I want to do, because obviously we don't want to leave them tag ends on, and again using your scissors and not your teeth, is make sure you're trimming these right back. So trim that one back, get rid of that excess line, we don't want to be leaving that out. And then exactly the same on your main line that you've just put on the spool. Hold that line, get that out. And then you do exactly the same thing again. You put that spool in the water. So make sure that's nice and tight again, you drag. I got the word of that last time, didn't I? And then this comes through. And what I like to do, once I've got a few wraps on this spool, is you'll just see where that knot's facing. Make sure it's just nice and smooth down there, because you don't want it sticking up the wrong way. It shouldn't do. You tied it that way, it shouldn't stick up at all, but just make sure of it. And then what I want to keep an eye on now is that I'm not going sort of over the lip of here or down here. I don't want that line obviously to come back here because it's going to cause tangles. So I just want to make sure that we've got enough on. Again, I'm holding it with my hand. We've got enough on so it's going to be nice and smooth. So we're coming through that there. I'm just going to have a feel with my fingers. Yeah, I'll just take a little bit more. There you go. So you can see that Richard zooms in. You can see how we've got that line. So it's nice and smooth right to the top. So that when we're casting out, obviously this is going to be reversed in a sec. When we're casting out, we know it's going to be absolutely bang on and our spool's going to be loaded right. So next thing we need to do is just snip that off there, wind that down a little bit. And then with these, obviously there's loads of different connections with these reels of putting the spools on. With these ones, it's just a case of just clicking that button and releasing them that way. Some reels where you've got to, that mechanism there, the drag mechanism, you've got to keep screwing that, and that's what releases the spool. So we're going to put an empty spool on now. Empty spool goes on. There we go. Open the bail arm, and again, I'm just going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to put the line through the eyes of the rod. I mean, you don't even need to do it. Just put it on a, just use the reel. But it's so much easier using a rod. You've got so much more purchase on the actual reel. So again, exactly what we did before. It's probably easier to show you actually with this blooming red line. I'm going to make a loop push that back on itself. So it's created that. I'm just going to put that through there just once. And obviously, because this line is really, really thick and strong, you pull down nice and tight on that. So that's not gonna slip when I'm pulling down. Tighten it onto the spool. And then use your scissors again, because we want to make sure this is a close knot. We don't want to use our teeth. Trim it right the way back. In fact, I'll hold that up so Rich can see it. So there's hardly any tag end in that whatsoever. You know on that, Richard? Of course he's on it. And again, get rid of your old line in the bag. So the single bit of line, that's going to go through the loop. Just how you'd attach, you know, if you're doing a pole connection like a dacron or something. Open that up, and that then, again, make sure your bail arm's open. That goes onto the spool. Close the bail arm and then tighten that up, and then you're just going back in reverse. Now, don't worry about putting these into the water, folks. Don't make a blind bit of difference, but what you get a bit of air trapped in, so give it a little tip like that to get the bubbles out. Let's get rid of that line out of there. So that goes in, and just give it a little bit of to make sure it sinks. And then we're just gonna repeat the process again. Easy, isn't it? It is the most simple but effective way of loading a reel. I've done this for years and years now, and I've never ever had any trouble with it. Never. And you got perfect line every single time. So there's one thing we've got to make sure we're doing though, is now, so that knot, you'll feel that knot come through your fingers. Now where's that knot? So that knot is out down there. So what I want to do is I want to manipulate, big word for me folks, I know what I mean though, manipulate where I'm putting that knot. So it was down there before, towards the bottom of the spool. I want to make sure that that is in from the middle to the top, and I'm just going to bed it in a bit with my fingers like that. Just make sure it's bedded in, keep tension on that line, and then just keep winding down, because you don't want obviously that knot protruding at the end, because your line can catch in it when you're casting out, and it's just a case of just winding the rest of your line on. Right, so when you think you're near, I don't think we'll be far off, just slow down a little bit, because the last thing you want is that spool bing, firing back at you at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So just slow it down a little bit. Oh, this looks absolutely perfect. There we go. Bring that spool out. Bite that down with your teeth actually. Trim that down, and then I'm going to pull that all the way through, and I'm just going to put it around my line clip, and there you go. That's how you get absolutely perfect line every single time, folks. Couldn't be simpler. Give it a go and you'll never do another way of loading your reel ever again in your wide world.
Right, you lads, very, very sorry to interrupt your video watching.
How dare you?
Quickly, if you haven't already noticed, we have managed to write a book, haven't we?
Yes, we have,
Which
Jamie.
is full of all our very bestest methods and features or whatever else we do on this wonderful subject of fishing. So if you haven't had a look already, go and have a look at winningways.shop and buy one for yourself.